This is Kyle Krabs, your host here on Locked On Dolphins. Today is Monday, February 21st, 2022. We are 1 week away from the start of the 2022 NFL Scouting Combine, which means we have to finish our roster assessment this week on the show. We are starting today with defensive linemen. How did the defensive linemen perform? We don't have to necessarily worry about scheme changes, but let's project these performances from 2021 forward to 2022. Cheers. Let's get after it.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Dolphins fans? Kyle Krabs, your host here on Locked On Dolphins. Lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, director of scouting at thedraftnetwork.com. And excited today to get into the defensive side of the football for our roster assessment for the 2021 NFL season. Some exciting jumps that were taken for the Miami Dolphins along the defensive front. We're going to talk about who those players were, what kind of performances we should expect to be the norm moving forward, what the departure of Brian Flores may or may not do to the defensive side of the ball, particularly up front. And, of course, we would be remiss to not mention Coach Flores has found the landing spot amidst his dismissal from the Miami Dolphins and the litigation that he has posted against the league for unfair and unequal hiring processes, and for the sake of the Miami Dolphins, accusations of violating the competitive integrity of the league. Brian Flores has landed as a defensive assistant / linebackers coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That news came out over the weekend. And of course, I'm sure there will be plenty of Dolphins fans who have their eyes peeled to I Am Athlete. Today, Coach Flores going on with Brandon Marshall, Chad Ochocinco, and Omar Kelly for an interview for the I Am Athlete podcast. Look for that. I believe it drops at noon today. And I'm sure there will be plenty of Dolphins fans who are very eager to hear Coach Flores speak about his time in Miami and his departure and the kind of the grounds of the litigation that he's put against the league. And of course, also there's the layer of Omar Kelly involved, who has been pretty vocal about his experience with Coach Flores and his experiences with the validity of the grounds in which he was dismissed on. And there's going to be some interesting takeaways for sure that come from that. So that's something for you guys to keep your eyes peeled for today. And I Am Athlete is in general a great podcast, so definitely recommend you guys check it out. So that's on YouTube. So are we, Locked On Dolphins. If you're listening on the podcast feed and interested in getting the video content, we got that for you there as well. So with that in mind, the defensive side of the football for the Dolphins, starting up front, you've got critical players. And Christian Wilkins is a former first-round pick. Jalen Phillips is a rookie in this year's first round. Emmanuel Ogbah is an expiring contract. And Adam Butler is a free agent signing. And Zach Sieler and Raekwon Davis. You got some beef up front. And I look at this group in its entirety. And guys like Andrew Van Ginkel, I'm going to put them in the linebackers. We'll talk about them tomorrow on the show. But you think about the Dolphins' base front, right? When it's, if they're base 3-4 and you're playing Ogbah at one end spot and Davis and Wilkins, or you want to go heavier and you go four-man front, and you put Sieler in and push Ogbah out as an end man on line of scrimmage, and Jalen Phillips, technically he could be classified as a outside linebacker, but for the sake of this discussion, he's primarily a pass rusher. He's going to get put in the defensive end, the defensive line group. I would say one thing that you have to be excited about was significant leaps in production from effectively everybody on the front. Obviously, Raekwon Davis missed 3 games, effectively 4 games. He got hurt in the season opener against the Patriots, spent 3 weeks on IR, came back, was a really reliable plug player in the middle for the Dolphins. There's no doubt the run defense was better with him involved. You wish there was more snaps to be had for Zach Sieler, who was a waiver wire pickup for the Dolphins in 2019. Adam Butler as a rotational pass rusher fulfilled his role very, very well. Jalen Phillips came on strong in the back half of the season and really strung together a strong stretch of plays. He was third on the team in quarterback hits with 16 this season. He was tied for second, a four-way tie for second place on the team with 9 tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks, came on slow. And then Emmanuel Ogbah with 12 passes defensed. He was second on the team behind only Xavier Howard. He had led the team in sacks with 9 sacks. He was also tied for second on the team with 9 tackles for loss. He was first on the team with 24 quarterback hits. A lot of strong performances from a lot of places. And I didn't even mention Christian Wilkins, who in year 3, I think he posted the most tackles by a defensive lineman in the NFL, 89 since 2015, I think it was. He was second on the team in tackles. He was 3 away from leading the team in tackles behind Jerome Baker. 3 tackles away from leading the team as an interior defensive lineman. That is bonkers. That's nuts. And it was a big step forward for Wilkins in year 3 to get more involved as a pass rusher. He had 4.5 sacks. He had 10 tackles for loss, which led the team a lot more in the way of splash plays for Christian Wilkins. If I had to evaluate the defensive line group as a whole, I would probably assign this a B+ or an A-. The group in its entirety, guys fulfilled their roles very well. It took some guys a little while to get their feet wet and kind of assimilate into this year's defense. And if they would have been able to start faster, it might have been able to make a difference for the team in some of those close losses. You think about Jacksonville and Atlanta and the Raiders game. Some of those plays that defensively you just needed to stop, and you could have won some football games kind of stacked up against you. But in general, I look at what you got out of the defensive front, and you saw growth from almost everybody that wasn't an established vet, like a John Jenkins, who only played when Davis was on IR. But let's start with Christian Wilkins. Wilkins came into this year having played 30 games in the NFL. And across those 30 games, he had 3.5 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, 7 quarterback hits. This year alone in 17 games, so nearly half the sample size of his first 2 seasons, Wilkins more than doubled his career total in sacks. 3.5 in his first 2 seasons, 4.5 in 2021. 7 tackles for loss across his first 2 seasons, 10 tackles for loss, which led the team in 2021. 7 quarterback hits through his first 2 seasons, 13, nearly double his first 2 years combined in year 3, 2021. Still had 4 passes defensed. He had a forced fumble, a fumble recovery. This was a much, I know obviously the tackle production. Plays on special. He played on the punt team from time to time, or punt return, and was railroading guys. He did a lot. He was involved in offense. He caught a touchdown pass. Got 4-6 touchdown celebrations out of the chamber for 1 touchdown. By the way, Christian Wilkins for his career, 2 targets, 2 receptions, 2 yards, 2 touchdowns. Keep him in the goal line. Keep him in the goal line package. But this was the player the Dolphins thought they were getting when they drafted Christian Wilkins at 13 overall in 2019. And to get that player, that's a win. That's a really big win. And this is somebody who showed this year he doesn't have to just be a gap control type player. He can play in a penetration style approach. So as the Dolphins move forward from here, that's one of the big worries about players that you invest in is, okay, do they have longevity over scheme change? I would say Christian Wilkins showcased his ability to transition through scheme changes this past year because he was much more involved as a penetration player and creating splash plays. And he was close to a couple other sacks that he didn't even get the chance to finish. So Christian Wilkins this season as a general, I would give an A to. This was the player. This was the player who materialized and manifested all of our hopes and aspirations for who he was going to be. Major win. Also major win if you have Built Bar lying around at home. Built Bar is a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. These things are high in protein, high in fiber, low in calories, low in sugar. They have 100% chocolate on all of their bars. And best of all, you can save 15% by using promo code LOCKED15 at built.com. That is built.com, promo code LOCKED15 to save 15% of your next order of the world's most delicious protein bar. The next highest grade that I would give to anybody on the defensive front would probably have to be Emmanuel Ogbah. Ogbah entered into year 6 in the NFL after 3 seasons in Cleveland, 1 season in Kansas City, and now 2 seasons. His career totals: he had 12.5 sacks in 3 years in Cleveland. He had 5.5 sacks in 1 year in Kansas City, in which he played 10 games. And he has played every single game for the Miami Dolphins in each of the last 2 seasons, and he has logged 18 sacks, 9 total in each of the last 2 seasons. And you compare this year to last year. Ogbah was a better player this year in year 2, the second year of his 2-year, $15 million contract, which was a home run signing that was made by the Dolphins. 2020, he had 5 passes defense. This year he had 7. He tied his total for sacks with 9 apiece. But from a pressures perspective, he had 3 more quarterback hits this year than he had last year. He had nearly the same amount of tackles, 42 versus 41, but he had 3 more tackles for loss. Emmanuel Ogbah has showcased enough across the last 2 seasons that if the Dolphins are going to sustain the same style of play, that Emmanuel Ogbah deserves a sizable contract, a piece of that puzzle. It's really hard not to give him a B+. I think if you just put him on the lexicon of NFL pass rushers, and there's guys that are getting 20 sacks per year, I can't necessarily justify giving him an A grade the way that I gave Christian Wilkins an A grade. But Christian's A came more so from the leaps in production and disruption that he made this year. Whereas Emmanuel was an incrementally better player, but his ceiling as a pass rusher might not necessarily be in the lexicon of NFL pass rushers at the top end of that list. But I don't see any reason why, if you don't run it back from a defensive scheme perspective, that Emmanuel Ogbah is not on your roster and starting day one. I know there were injury concerns there. He missed 6 games for Cleveland in 2017. He missed 2 games for Cleveland in 2018. He missed 6 games for Kansas City in 2019. I'm a knock on wood. This guy hasn't missed a game in 2 seasons. He did not miss a game across the 2-year, $15 million deal that you gave. Now, the challenge is you're probably going to have to pay him double that to get back in the building. And that's that math can be challenging. It shouldn't be challenging from a Dolphins and a cap perspective. But Ogbah looking to parlay 18 sacks in 2 seasons and 17 passes defensed in 2 seasons into what might be his last big contract. Because remember, he's 28 years. He was 28 years old this past season. Emmanuel is going to turn 29 in season next year in November. If he signs a 4-year deal, he'll be 33. And your chances of getting a big contract at the age of 33 are pretty slim. So this is it for Emmanuel as far as, I understand why he's going to want to maximize his value and earning potential because he's put together his best 2 seasons by far in the NFL. And if Miami's not giving him competitive offers now, then I would imagine they're going to want to see what the rest of the market looks like. Miami may be hoping and may ultimately know we'll pay the price that's needed to bring him back. It seems like Emmanuel wants to be here, but they don't want to bid against themselves. So they want to find out what the market is for him before they end up making that decision. That's a risky move. But if they're doing that, one would assume that they are banking on what is a very, very good pass rusher class this year in the NFL draft. And there are some other expiring contracts at the edge position across the NFL that perhaps they're hoping that can help suppress that market value. And this might not be a $15 million per year contract that they need to sign with Emmanuel Ogbah. If it is, I'm not going to be mad about it because this is a BB plus caliber edge defender / pass rusher in the NFL. And I guess we'll keep it on the edge. Let's talk about Jalen Phillips next. Jalen, of course, he got red hot during that stretch in which he posted 6 sacks in 4 weeks or whatever it was, and he was just a man possessed for the Dolphins. He finished second on the team in sacks with 8.5. He played across the full course of the season, 603 snaps defensively, which is 54%. And I think there's a lot of room for growth for Jalen as far as his ability to play the run. And that was something that I did think was evident coming out of the University of Miami. But you look at his usage this year, and I don't know how you don't get excited about what this is potentially going to look like down the stretch and into year 2 when he had the major boom. It was 6 sacks in 3 weeks against the Jets, Panthers, and Giants. And I know those offensive lines are not good, but even you roll up and include Baltimore and Houston, he's got 7 sacks in 5 weeks. And that was all in the back half of the season. He had 1.5 sacks in the first half of the year. But he had 22 snaps in week 1 against New England, a team that runs the ball at a high clip. He had 18 snaps against Buffalo, a team that ended up winning the game 35-0, and Miami fell behind early and was chasing the entire game. He ended up playing 15 snaps against Atlanta, and that was a game that Miami was behind the majority of the game and was chasing, ended up getting the lead in the final couple minutes, and Atlanta kicked a game-winning field goal to close the game out. He played 23 snaps against the Tennessee Titans, and we all know how that game script went as well. So I think you look at some of his usages and where his drops and snaps came, and it's pretty apparent that the game scripts in which the other team was able to run the ball at a high clip, Jalen wasn't on the field. For a rookie, I'd give Jalen as a top 20 pick, probably a B-, B+ type of season. I think he was really close to a lot of other splash plays as a pass rusher. You saw there were just some instances in which his ability to get stacked and extended and then be able to parlay and transition off of that contact and get into pursuit was just like a half a tick too late. And if the quarterback wasn't able to hold that ball for that extra half second looking for somebody to throw the ball to, Jalen wasn't able to get there. But as that becomes more natural for him, I don't think there's any reason why we shouldn't expect Jalen Phillips to be a double-digit type pass rusher moving forward. He certainly has that physical ceiling. That's how you get drafted as the top pass rusher in the draft, and you're off the board in the top 20. Now, can you become a more well-rounded and well-developed player? That's the challenge for Jalen. That's where I think the biggest growth opportunity for him is going to come. Because if this dude can start playing the run anywhere near as well as what his potential is rushing the passer, if this dude gets to a spot where he can play 75-80% of your defensive snaps on any given week, and for the record, he only did 75% of the snaps 3 times all year long. And that was Tampa Bay, Jacksonville, and the second Buffalo game. Those are the only times that Jalen surpassed 75% of your defensive snaps. So I'm excited for Jalen and his continued growth. I'm excited to see what additional pass rush moves. And this is a guy who, also spent some time away from playing football and came back to the University of Miami and stacked on the weight that he had lost when he was retired after his tenure at UCLA, and is kind of, I don't want to say relearning, but had to remake his body going into that year with the Miami Hurricanes and had a massive season that was based largely on instinct, based on being the top recruit coming out of high school when he was initially recruited, and athleticism. The ceiling here is very high. The challenge for Jalen is avoiding some of the injury stuff that bogged him down in his early college days. But this is another solid B performance as far as I am concerned on the Dolphins' defensive front. Football season is over, but basketball is full steam ahead for both pro and college hoops. For all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, betonline.net is your number one spot for all your sports betting needs. It is the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. Betonline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage, which just wrapped as well. Head over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. Bet online, where the game starts. Continuing our journey through the Miami Dolphins defensive line, let's talk about Zach Sieler a little bit. Zach Sieler didn't necessarily get the splash plays that he got the year prior. In 2020, Sieler had more sacks. He had more tackles for loss. He had more quarterback hits. But I think that's also reflected in how the Dolphins chose to use Zach Sieler and the addition of one Adam Butler to the defensive front in free agency. That took a lot of the snaps that Zach Sieler would have had the chance to have on his plate. And Adam Butler took those reps. And that's fine. Adam Butler was a perfectly serviceable third down pressure package specialist on your defensive front. But Zach Sieler needs to play more football. His per snap production in all phases is very, very strong. He had 62 tackles on 500 snaps last year. He was making the tackle on nearly 1 out of every 5 snaps that he took. He also played way too much special teams. And I understand, when you're only playing 46% of the defensive snaps, which is what he played in the year prior in 2020, he played 52% of the defensive snaps. You want to get him on the field a little bit more, so you give him an extra 90 snaps on special teams versus the previous year. I get it. But Zach Sieler is too good of a football player to not play more often. And maybe the move here is, if you do let Emmanuel Ogbah go, maybe Zach Sieler can be the guy who takes the other base and front, so you can go Sieler, Davis, Wilkins as your front three on your odd front looks. Because Sieler is a guy who's a little bit more traditional as far as what you would see in a 4-eye alignment. 6'6", 300 pounds, stout, can quickly shoot a gap if you ask him to do that. That would be one area where, if the Dolphins do make a change, I would not be surprised to see them get Zach Sieler more involved. And he's going to be on the roster. And then you would just need to draft or sign in free agency a speed rusher to potentially take some of the reps from Jerome Baker if you're not going to continue to play Jerome Baker as that end man on the line of scrimmage role that he played so frequently in the back half of the season, starting in the Baltimore game last year. So there could be some moving pieces here, depending on how they choose to shift and evolve and absorb the potential loss of Emmanuel Ogbah. But it does give me a little bit of solace to know that you got this dude on your bench who played 518 snaps last year, 46% of your defensive snaps, who should be getting 65. He should be getting another 20% of workload. And just as a point of reference for Christian Wilkins took 65% of the defensive snaps. What you would ideally like to see Zach Sieler getting, which is 19% more than what Sieler got this past year. So you do the math that way, and that's one way for if you are strip down Adam Butler, if you're going to strip down Emmanuel Ogbah, you've got some flexibility to get Zach Sieler on the field more. But based on what was put on his plate, this is another solid B performance as far as I'm concerned. maybe a little bit more production. You would have liked to have not seen the tackles for loss and the sacks dip the way that they did. But contextually, you understand why that was the case. Which brings us to one, Adam Butler. Free agent signing, signed a modest deal. Came in this year, Adam Butler played a total of 591 snaps. So 53% of the defensive snaps for the Dolphins this year. Obviously a little bit higher than what Zach Sieler got. And Adam, across those snaps, logged 5 quarterback hits, 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, 17 tackles. So he came in because he knew the system, right? His first 4 years prior, and he posted 15 sacks in 4 years as a New England Patriot, or in New England, playing in the same system that the Dolphins largely were playing under Brian Flores. Makes sense. But Adam, in that change and transition and new contract, tied his career lows in sacks, tied his career lows in tackles for loss, and posted middle of the road for him production from a quarterback hits perspective. There were no forced fumbles, no fumble recoveries. He had 3 passes defensed, which was second highest of his career, but he put 5 up in 2019 and then had 2 other years and didn't post any his rookie season. So, and he tied a career low in tackles with 17. So I guess this is, for me, the first place that I look at for the Dolphins' defensive front and feel like maybe there was some meat left on the bone. I think he was a fine player. I'd give him a C for what he was. But I don't think the Dolphins brought him into the fray to be their 4th most impactful defensive lineman. And if you're including the run game, he's probably 5th most impactful defensive lineman. So what that means for Adam going forward, hard to say. I'm going to check real quick. Should have had this prepped ahead of time. But I want to check Adam Butler's contract situation as far as what kind of transition the Dolphins could make for Adam Butler. He signed a 2-year contract with the Dolphins worth $7.5 million. Should the Dolphins choose to go in a different direction, they will have no dead cap this year. That might be a maneuver I'm willing to entertain. Obviously, the biggest champion of Adam was, you would presume, to be the coach that worked with him in New England, in Brian Flores. But if you bring back Emmanuel Ogbah and Adam Butler is your roadblock to getting more snaps for Zach Sieler, I am certainly strongly considering making that change, especially when you consider Adam Butler is on the books for $4.15 million in cash. If I could save $4.15 million and get Zach Sieler on the field more, and potentially absorb that by also giving some of those reps in interior reps to Raekwon Davis if necessary, I'm probably going to do that. Because Raekwon, across the 14 games that he played 47% of the snaps. He's not a pass rusher. There's no bones about it. Raekwon Davis is not a pass rusher. He's a nose tackle. But you have a guy in Zach Sieler who could take on 20% higher workload. And Raekwon Davis, I don't see any reason why he couldn't take on some of those snaps. 47%. If you absolutely needed somebody to. Or you can go out and get yourself an undersized twist and stunt game interior defensive lineman on day 3 of any NFL draft and hope that he can mentally grasp what you're going to put on his plate. So Adam Butler's the one that, as I look at and project, I have some questions about whether or not he's going to be here. And that, of course, is a side of Emmanuel Ogbah, who I would certainly bring back, but it's just a question of financials and if the Dolphins are going to make that work or not. But Raekwon, you're not going to find Raekwon Davis's value in splash production. He had a half a sack this year. He had 1 tackle for loss. He had 1 quarterback hit. But he did have 28 tackles. He was a very, very stiff and stout presence for you on the defensive front. And the Dolphins' run defense was clearly better when he was in the game. I do not put too much stock into the Tennessee game and the yardage that Tennessee was able to put up on the ground. Because remember, Miami was caught in a dogfight on the road in cold weather, and the straw that broke the back was the 39-yard rush from Dontrell Hilliard. That put Tennessee up over or nearly at 200 yards rushing. They finished with 40 rushes for 198 yards. 39-yard rush touchdown within the final 2 minutes in garbage time, down 24 points, is going to make that look even worse than what it is. But Raekwon has a lot of value for this team as the man in the middle who's going to keep everybody else clean. And I don't think there's any doubt, especially with this system coming back, you'd have some questions about, okay, what's the spot for a nose if you transition to an even front team, and what's that value going to look like, and did you lose a second-round pick? That's why I'm a fan of at the very least, staying in odd front-based defenses when you want to try to stop the run because you have that player on the roster. So, in general, I think this is a very strong start to the defensive assessment for the Miami Dolphins. I feel like all of these guys, barring Emmanuel Ogbah's contract and Adam Butler from a potential savings and opportunity cost of getting other guys on the field perspective, they all make sense to be back for Miami. Whether or not they are, we'll see. And we will see you tomorrow on the show. Kyle Krabs, Locked On Dolphins. Thanks as always for listening. Keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. Make it a good month.